Someone said to me tonight, "Oh, joy fits you so well," and I hear that all the time. And when I was in my 50s, I realized that I was named Joy in order to, because my father was hoping I'd bring joy to my mother's life. And because something I didn't know was that her mother had committed suicide 2 years before I was born. And so and then when I was 3, her father, she was an only child, disinherited her. And so I grew up in the midst of two tragedies I really didn't know anything about, except I was there with my grandfather. We grew up in the house where she committed suicide, and it was a silent presence. And the spirituality part of it. So I was replacing. My father hoped that I would bring joy to my mother, because my brother was born first, soon after the suicide, and a girl to bring joy. So that was my assignment in life. And 2 things happened to me in terms of my spiritual journey when I was younger. One was I heard in church, what I remember were Jesus' parables and stories about Jesus and other people, and that he cared about them and helped them. And I think that was so important to me, because at the same time there really wasn't anyone helping my mother with her grief, even though I didn't know what it was. And the other thing I heard is that God loves you, but when you're perfect, God will really love you.
Oh my goodness.
It took a long time to unlearn that. And I think it's so important for us to think about what we're teaching in church and in religious traditions, in church, synagogue, anywhere where there's in sanghas. What are we teaching, and what could especially children hear that may impact them? And of course I learned those things as a girl too. But the stories about Jesus and how he cared for people and healed people held me strong through the time when I was trying to understand my mother's sickness. I mean, she was very mentally torn apart by what had happened to her, which was pretty inexplicable. She had fought with her father when the concentration camps opened. It was in the early 40s. 45, that was. And he disinherited her. He was German, and his people had lost. And I don't know any more of the story than that. But that has informed a lot of what I believe and my own journey. And praying and God was a big comfort to me. And then, as I got older, I needed to figure out the story, because life got really rough emotionally. It was hard to understand why my mother was so sick, and yet so loving and caring for other people, but couldn't get well herself. And finally, when I was 32, she died of untreated breast cancer, which I call passive suicide. She couldn't make it through after she raised us, because she never was helped to grieve and understand her story. I always felt loved by her, but I didn't understand what was happening to her. And there was a period where I was really supposed to save her. My father would, she would come visit me. I had babies. I had 2 children at the time. And it made me sick, because she was drinking, self-medicating. Now I know. But I didn't know what was happening. I just knew this was terrible. Whatever was happening was terrible. And I wanted, then I read about alcoholism. And so I worked trying to understand why she would do that. And that's how I figured out her story. Was trying to understand, how could this happen to this very intelligent woman? And then her life was over. She was educated by the Quakers, so her spiritual journey informed mine.
Mm-hmm.
She really cared about people, and I think that was the Quaker tradition really strengthened her. And so my mother's faith really, I think, in church there's a hymn, Faith of Our Fathers, Living Still. Well, for me, I sing Faith of Our Mothers, because that's the faith that really impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
But it also silenced me, and that's taken a long time to heal, because I've been afraid to confront authority.
Mm-hmm.
I just can go just so far. Most people think I'm totally radical, that I have no problem, but I know where I won't go.
Mm-hmm.
I've known where I won't go. That's changed and changing, because I don't want to die without having done the work I think I need to do. For me, what eventually happened was the big question came up of what happens to women when God is named as a man, as male, as he, as almighty, patriarchal, above, and we're nothing. And of course, I couldn't live that way. I would have died too. So that question probably has kept me alive in some ways. So when I was in seminary, I studied with some of the great feminists of the 1980s, all the first feminist theologians. And it's so life-giving. But the church really doesn't want to hear